All right, let's get back into that conversation. Riam is still here with us, CEO, Regional Voluntary Carbon Market Company at VCMC, Chris McKinney, Chief Commercial Officer, Bern, Clarice Wambua, lawyer, Cliff Decker and Hofmeyer, and James Mwangi, CEO, Africa Climate Ventures and founder, Climate Action Platform. Thank you so much for being patient enough for us to continue this conversation. A lot of interest on this carbon credit trade. And Riam, how significant is then the role of these voluntary markets in driving the emissions reductions efforts, especially here in Africa?
Okay, it's extremely significant, the role that the voluntary carbon markets are going to play. Let me step back and zoom out globally, what is happening, and then to the demand side, which is driving the supply eventually. If I start globally, last year, economically, the globe emitted around circa 40 gigatons of CO2 emissions. That means, as we all know, that the 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050 is not going to be reached if we continue emitting at the same pace. And that means that we're going to be around 3.4 to 3.6. What does that mean for voluntary carbon market? It needs removal credits. Removal credits mean planting trees, mean blue carbon, all of these activities. Blue carbon is very effective here in East Africa and also in West Africa. It's all of these mangrove trees and seagrass and kelp that help in sequestering carbon. So removal carbon are not going to be economic without carbon credit offset as a mean of financing. So we're talking here about carbon credit financing to solve the issue of the current emission globally, even if we reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius. If you're very optimistic, we still need removal credits to reach that. So that's the global view. Now, if you zoom into the demand side, this is a voluntary market, meaning companies in the demand side are volunteering to buy this carbon credit offset to complement as a tool for the decarbonization plan. One of the things that we would really like to encourage is, as companies are going through their decarbonization plan, to accelerate and complement their climate action by using carbon credit offset. So we've seen the VCMI coming recently and having gold and platinum for those who go the extra mile beyond their decarbonization plan and using carbon credit offset. So that is one in the demand side. And we've seen a lot of companies, and in Saudi Arabia, even family businesses. I was really pleasantly surprised that family business are keen on driving climate action in Saudi Arabia. Moving into the next layer, which is the supply side, where Africa is going to be a big player. If we say Africa is emitting 1% of the global emissions, it means like it is a player in the supply. So what Africa's role is supplying the world with carbon credits, like what President Ruto mentioned today. So how would that be? That would be through financing these projects, making sure that the integrity of this project are to the top-notch quality, like what Clarice has mentioned, the co-benefits of the community. And I agree with you, co-benefits really matters for our buyers. So in our auctions, we were asked about co-benefits. So it's very important to make sure that some of the money channels back from the project developers to the communities and advancing the status of the communities. Today, if I were to say one story that touched me as a human, I went and I looked at cook stoves, and the woman was showing me how, it's a Kenyan woman who cooks. I went to her, with her, and started cooking with her and the old methodology. And the fume is unbelievable. The impact to health is unbelievable. And when you're asking her, she says it's not good for my children. She doesn't talk about herself. The way she carries the wood from the market, it's heavyweight. She carries it home. And all of that impact we see, that's impact on communities, on health, co-benefit for community, reducing emissions. So this is a very important role that Africa would play to satisfy that demand, and it's going to be the global demand that we're talking. There are countries that is going to be net importers of carbon credits. This is the future. We will see more of that coming, and Africa could be the supplier So I had the Honorable Minister C.S. Kerry today saying we are going to be like the oil and gas bloc. We're going to have a bloc to export carbon credits.
Carbon credits,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Chris, I really like what Riam is talking about, because this is now real life experience with someone who's trying to cook and the emissions coming out. Do we have real data that highlight what the measurable impact of these clean cook stoves?
Yeah. Well, let me just speak first to kind of put a finer point on what Rihan was just describing around the urgency and importance of voluntary markets for Africa. One of the original purposes of the first UN-sanctioned carbon trading mechanism was to drive funding from the heavily polluting global north to the less polluting global south, who is experiencing most of the impacts of climate change. And that was with the recognition that many of the solutions to climate change, such as clean cooking solutions, weren't going to happen if just companies independently tried to abate their own emissions. Somebody cooking on a three-stone fire, it isn't part of any company's abatement plan to reduce their own emissions. So it's critical to have voluntary carbon markets step in and help solve these problems and drive funding into Africa. It's what the carbon markets were really built for. So when you look at how Burn, for instance, interplays with the voluntary markets, to your question about data, well, we had a study that was just published last year, a peer-reviewed study on our project in Kenya that looked at what is the impact of one single burn stove, a jiko-koa, on a home and on the community more broadly. This study not only found that the fuel used was cut in half, and therefore the emissions were cut by half from these stoves, but it found that when you added up all the economic impacts of the stove, from the fuel savings that are generated by the home, the health impacts and the environmental impacts, a single stove, 5,000 shilling stove, let's say, can generate over $1,000, so over 150,000 shillings worth of value that it brings back to Kenya over its lifetime. So this is an independent economic study that quantified all these impacts and found just enormous impact that comes from distributing a single stove. And when you zoom out and look at how this has affected our company and our industry more broadly, clean cooking, many countries across Africa have targets on achieving universal access to clean cooking. Kenya has a target to achieve universal access to clean cooking in 2028. The primary source of funding that's actually driving countries towards universal access to clean cooking is carbon funding. And companies like Burn have really stepped up to achieve scale using the carbon markets and try to address this problem. So today, we're present in 9 countries. We've built 3 factories across Africa, and we're supplying around 250,000 stoves every single month, mostly funded through carbon markets to put into the hands of end users with a subsidized price. Yeah,
and many people are asking, where do they get these clean cook stoves? I've seen a lot of that online.
Yeah, so we have teams who actually go door to door around Kenya doing prospecting and deliveries. So we're doing around 40,000 stoves a month. If they haven't come to your neighborhood yet, they'll be there soon.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, it's just a matter of time. Right. James, now that we're talking about carbon offsetting, and many companies are talking about net zero emissions, how then do companies effectively ensure that their offsets have a tangible impact?
That's a very good question, and it actually ties to a comment that was made, and we hear this criticism a lot from civil society about the risk of greenwashing, which again is where the carbon market loses integrity. So we're not achieving the emissions effects we need to achieve for the planet, and we're not achieving the benefits we need to see for the community. And I think the question is, how do we avoid that? One piece of that you've already heard very powerfully described here, which is on the supply side. Africa needs to be a place where you're generating high quality, high integrity credits. This means real benefits are being delivered to real people, my shosho upcountry, young people who are working in particular jobs, etc., are receiving tangible benefits, and those benefits are sustained because of the carbon credit. That's the supply side. So the money has been spent to make the planet better and to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases from what would have otherwise happened. But there's also integrity on the buyer side. Right? So we've got corporates that are spending on a voluntary basis in many cases to offset their emissions. And I think the criticism that was made earlier was, well, why is the global north not first reducing their emissions? Why are they paying us to remove them or to avoid ours? And I think the answer is simple, right? If you just think about what you practically mean by that, right? Imagine if we were to say, Kenya, we have very little emissions, but we have some. If you said, stop all emissions tomorrow, that means no petrol, no diesel, no cement, no building materials of various other kinds, no fertilizer for agriculture. It's not actually possible to just stop. However, we all need to be working on a number of steps. The first step is eradicate waste. So you need to be looking at corporates, for example, and saying, wherever you can avoid emissions that are coming from just wasteful behavior, inefficient machinery and so on, are you doing all you can to make sure your process in your company or in your life, as someone who is emitting a lot in your lifestyle or whatever, that you've reduced all of that waste. You're turning off lights, you're doing all of that stuff, you're moving to an efficient car, and so on and so forth. Then the second thing is, where the technology allows you to, you should be investing in technology that is cleaner. So you're shifting to, you know, the next stage of low-emitting technologies. Yeah. But there's still areas where we haven't come up with solutions, and even adopting those solutions takes time. So in every case, there will be emissions that are still out there. Now, when you buy carbon credits, it's not, you know, there used to be a narrative that says, oh, I've paid for my carbon credits, leave me alone. Don't ask me what I'm doing. That should never happen. It should be clear all of us are in a race for survival, as President Ruto said. So you need to be saying, here's what I'm doing to reduce my emissions. First of all, any waste you see, that any unnecessary emissions, call me on it as a corporate. Yeah. The second thing is, for the emissions that remain, I'm trying to adopt new technologies, I'm investing in innovation, I'm looking at the future where those emissions will go away. Okay. And the third thing is, I make money as a corporate. I make profits as a corporate. I'm taking some of those profits, some of which are resulting from damage I'm doing to the atmosphere, and I'm sending them to places where A, they somewhat make up for the impacts of climate change, but B, they're helping pay for the solution, which is all of the activities we've described. Okay. So that's integrity on the buyer side and integrity on the seller side. It's not about killing the market, because we need the market to work. It's about bringing that level of integrity to eradicate greenwashing. Okay.
And Clarice, we've talked about quite a number of agreements. You mentioned some of them, including the Paris Agreement. But from a legal standpoint then, how can African countries leverage on those agreements to bolster their emissions reductions efforts and climate resilience as well?
Okay, so I think the Paris Agreement is really a very important, if not the most important, agreement on climate change that we have. And it is very important that African countries utilize it as the tool it is for us to be able to not only reduce our emissions, which are negligible, though they are going to rise as we industrialize, but also to ensure that we use it to adapt to climate change, which is really our biggest challenge, and to get the funding that we need to do that, which is climate finance that is recognized under the Paris Agreement, to get the technology transfer that we need to be able to decarbonize and also to adapt to climate change. And technology transfer is also recognized in the Paris Agreement. And lastly, we need capacity building, which is training, which is the creation of job opportunities and people who are able to do them. And capacity building is also recognized in the Paris Agreement. So these three components are recognized in this agreement as being due to developing countries from the developed world. Now, how do we leverage and ensure that we get these three components? Trevor, I think we need to make noise. We need to make noise in the sense that we need to ask, we need to demand. And it is good to see that civil society is playing their rightful role in demanding for this, but also private sector government is also demanding for this in using their voice as they can. And we saw this with President Ruto's speech and the other speeches that were made by the African Union representatives and other high delegate representatives in the summit today. So we need to make noise in the sense of demand and articulate what we need. But to do that, you need to be clear on what it is you really want. So we need to come together and come up with our common vision and common interest and articulate it on the global stage. So we have COP28 coming up that will be held at the, I think, UAE this year in December. So this summit is a good opportunity to come together, converge, and come up with that voice and list of what do we need to see as a country. We need finance. We need, I think I've mentioned them all. But secondly, we need to open up the Paris Agreement and utilize the provisions that we can already utilize without asking or without demanding for finance and the rest. And these provisions for me would be Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which talks about the use of cooperative approaches to reduce emissions. We have Article 6.26.3, which talks about countries being able to trade what are called ITMOs, internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. This wasn't there in the Kyoto Protocol. It is now in the Paris Agreement. It opens up an opportunity for Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda to have a one-on-one bilateral negotiation and agreement with another country that buys our ITMOs, our mitigation outcomes as a country. We can use that provision. We could use Article 6.4 of Paris Agreement, which allows a continuity of the CDM, but now as Article 6.4 mechanism, where the United Nations Framework Convention, the UNFCCC Secretariat, has oversight over the product that is being transferred. Or we could use non-market approaches, which are provided for under Article 6.8 of the Paris Agreement. So the agreement is rich. It has the tools that we could leverage on if we only opened it up and found where do we fit in, what are our priorities as country, as continent, and how do we best find cooperative approaches to reduce our emissions and adapt. Resilience is also very important. It's not just about emission reduction, but also climate resilience.
All right, we're about to wind up on this conversation and I'll see a bit of feedback that's coming through. But Riam, beyond just emissions reductions, and I like the fact that you spoke about the lady who you witnessed yourself, her cooking in the fumes there. How does then carbon trading initiatives contribute to some socioeconomic development and local empowerment of the people in the regions where the projects are put?
Well, I mean, seeing is believing, right? That's why I went. I saw. And we would like more to go and see and believe on what is happening on the ground and the opportunities that carbon credits could offer. It is part of the capacity building that Clarice was talking about, job opportunities. Some see climate change as a threat. I see climate change as an opportunity. A lot of jobs, like what James has mentioned in India. So a lot of opportunities, job markets that could be over there. One of the things that we thought about in RVCMC is how to allow the public, because currently is business to business, right? Buyers are business. How do we unlock finance? How do we let the public even contribute to that? Like if your grandmother wants to contribute to reduce climate emissions, what you would do. One of the things, and in RVCMC, we look at innovative solutions. So we looked at Islamic finance, the size of the Islamic finance in Saudi Arabia between mortgages, between financing different activities, $500 billion a year. The collective,
$500 billion.
Yes.
Wow.
The collective for the whole Islamic nations is $2.2 trillion a year. And as you know, or you might not, the Islamic finance used commodities as backing for all of the transaction. So we started talking to the Islamic Development Bank. How can we have carbon credit offset as a commodity backing the Islamic finance? So as an individual, when I go to the bank to get a mortgage, I could get a mortgage backed by carbon credits. So channeling funds, again, to carbon credits, and that's how we're going to enable, once we implement that, the public to participate in the market, not only businesses and channeling funds. A core pillar for Islamic financing is the greater good for the human race, and that play to it. So I'm really pleased that we had the first fatwa ever last year issued from the Islamic Development Bank to have carbon credit as a backing commodity. That's on a global scale. On a local scale, we went to the Saudi National Bank, the biggest bank in Saudi Arabia, and we sat with the clerics, we explained, and we got carbon credits as a backing commodity. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of job employment offers in Africa. reforestation. That is job opportunities. The project itself, benefits to communities. I don't see climate change as a threat to organizations. I see it as an opportunity for more job opportunities. The economy just needs to transition and shift the mindset into that.
All right. Trevor, if I can just give a specific example on that point as well. I think when you look at Burn as an example of what carbon markets can enable for local empowerment and local employment, we've been able to build a full value chain operation based here, headquartered here in Kenya, that encompasses the whole A to Z for our carbon project. So everything from the design of the stoves to the manufacturing, to the door-to-door distribution, through to the after sales, and then through to the carbon component. All of those teams for us are based here. We've been able to bring those team people, train those people, build up that local talent pool off the backs of the voluntary carbon markets. And now today we're sitting with around 2,700 employees across the continent, who all of that local employment and economic development has been created by carbon markets and will only continue to grow. So it's a really key tool for economic development. 2,700.
So what are some of the valuable lessons that you've learned as an organization that is dealing in this carbon trading that other organizations can learn from you?
Yeah, I think one of the key ones is around this idea of building solutions for Africa within Africa, right? Like when we came to this problem, very committed to solving the cooking crisis, even before carbon markets were a viable tool to do that, and we came committing to solve this problem permanently. So that meant setting up all of these operations here in the markets where our projects operate. And that was a really crucial lesson. It's given us a really big advantage now that the carbon markets are scaling so much. We're able to respond very quickly, ramp up factory capacity more quickly, produce more stoves, produce more carbon credits, and ultimately get more stoves to the people who need them the most. Because we're here on the ground and we've built up that local talent, now we're very agile. So I think that's a really key lesson.
All right.
And how many women do you have in your task force?
Yeah, we employ around 50% women, and we've always tried to keep
out
that
of the 2,700,
balance.
half.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring up some quick feedback here, then I'll take your closing remarks in terms of what you expect from the Africa Climate Summit. Just 1 minute each because we ran out of time here completely. Let's bring up that at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. Babu Michael says one of the carbon credits offset project is reforestation. At the moment, we are hard hit by climate change effects like prolonged droughts and very minimal rainfall. In which way can we still make this specific project effective? Okay, you can give that in your final remarks. Let's see what else is coming through. Vivian Stacy says, where is Chris from? And where can I get the clean cook stoves from? Where are you from, Chris?
I'm from the United States. I've been here in Kenya for 10 years and expect to remain much longer.
Okay. The cook stoves, you said that they're going door to door?
Yeah, they're available nationwide. We have teams who go kind of neighborhood by neighborhood, door to door. You can make inquiries on our website, burnstoves.com, and we're able to then get stoves out to.
But there's no specific place where somebody can walk in and buy one.
There are varieties of stoves that are sold not part of carbon projects, but we do sell stoves as well in like the major retail outlets. So even if you walk into a Naivas or a Quick Mart, you can find some of our stoves.
But those are not part of the carbon credit offset ones.
Correct.
So they're not as subsidized as
they're not as subsidized, but they still have all the same great benefits.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as we wind up on this, do we still have one more feedback or do we close on this? I know Pesa Coach says, we are here talking about carbon credits while giant polluters like energy and petroleum chemical companies are scrapping its $100 million annual carbon offset commitment. Where does this leave us morally? Okay, interesting question there. So as we wind up on this, and I'll come with you, Clarice, what do you expect from the Africa Climate Summit at the end of it all, legally speaking?
From the Climate Summit, and I think I alluded to it when I spoke earlier, I'm expecting an outcome that brings together the different voices of the different participants drawn from all over Africa, setting out in clear terms what they would like to see or what we would like to see at COP28.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to hearing really concrete issues mentioned, about financing, about the use of carbon markets, about adaptation, loss and damage as well, which was a big issue in last year's COP. So that is the main one. But over and above that, I'm hoping to see the momentum that the lead up to this summit has created.
Okay.
I'm hoping to see that it remains and even increases. It has been really good to see young people, the youth, children, indigenous communities really taking up their rightful space to speak up and to participate in this summit. And I find that there's been increased knowledge and awareness across the general public. Even what you're doing as Citizen TV is excellent. And I hope that this momentum continues, because at the end of the day, we need informed citizenry. We need everyone to speak up. And to speak up, you need to know the subject matter. And so my expectation is that we have more informed citizenship and more informed debate. And carbon markets doing well.
Okay, James?
So I think for me, the context is we're starting a century, right? This century is a century in which the biggest task facing humanity will be to undo the consequences of the emission-intensive industrial age. That's going to be the biggest task we as a species have. And what I'm hoping for from this summit is that coming out of it is a clear message, not told by the world to us, here are things you Africans should do or you can do, or here's something to help you. But Africa saying to the world that we as the youngest continent, we as the continent with the highest stake in the future, because the largest proportion of the population of the future is here in Africa, are saying we're taking ownership of this problem. We are developing the technologies and the solutions. We're changing our way of life in ways that allow us not just to say, well, we didn't cause this, can someone solve it? But rather, the future belongs to us. We are working to create that future. We're creating the mechanisms like carbon markets, like climate smart industries, like unlocking our energy potential to realize that future. And we're asking the world not to give us money out of pity or guilt, but to invest in that dynamic and exciting future that every young African can feel ownership for.
All right. Riam, I'll give you the final say on this. What do you expect?
I think this is the start, just the start. What I dream for to see in the coming years is Africa coming as one bloc, having one voice regarding how to treat carbon credits in the continent, be it tax, be it finance, be it quality of credits, rather than a bill in Kenya and a different bill in Zimbabwe, different acts, what is the co-benefits here versus there. I believe that could happen. A
unified structure across the continent.
That would help Kenya. Success in Kenya it opens the door for other countries in East Africa and beyond. So I would like to see coalition forming up between closer up nations, announcing together how they see the market, what are a unified bill between them, free trade, tax, finance, how to access the market, how to treat the communities. If that starts to happen and formulate, more nations would join, and then you would see a stronger, powerful market that would help the world, that would help the globe. All
right. All the best with that, and thank you so much for making time this evening. Interesting conversation there. Riam Elgizi, CEO, Regional Voluntary Carbon Market Company, RVCMC. Chris McKinney, Chief Commercial Officer, Bern. Clarice Wambua, lawyer, Cliff Decker and Hoffman. And James Mwangi, CEO, Africa Climate Ventures, and also founder, Climate Action Platform Africa. And thank you all for staying with us through this conversation. We're taking a quick break. I know there's a lot of feedback coming through. I'll still read some of them at the end of this conversation. But right now, we're taking a quick break. When you come back, it's time for some sporting action. And then I'll get into your feedback, all right? So don't go too far.